Hi everyone. Today I'm going to quickly go through some important points from the 2025 Belgian Grand Prix using data analysis, specifically looking at the speed trace data from that race to go through important overtakes or important flashpoints in the race. The first thing I'm going to go through is the Piastri and Norris race start and subsequent overtake by Piastri on Lando Norris at the Kemmel Straight. If we look on this telemetry data, on lap 5, which is when the race actually started after 4 laps under the safety car, we'll see that there's a huge about 20 kilometer per hour difference on the Kemmel Straight between Piastri in the blue line and Norris in the orange line. Piastri is then able to use this speed to overtake Norris on the Kemmel Straight and then eventually win the Grand Prix. This speed trace data here actually correlates with what Lando Norris said on the radio. If you remember from that race, Lando Norris said that he believed his battery had essentially been used up before the Kemmel Straight and that he was essentially derating through the entire straight, which is why Oscar was able to overtake him. If we look at the previous lap, lap 4, it is a possibility through sector 3 here that Norris essentially drained his battery. It's not really easy to tell, that's why I have a question mark here, but it is possible Lando, in an attempt to get a jump on Oscar, essentially drained his whole battery here. And it would make sense here too, potentially on the exit of the bus stop chicane, where it's obvious that Oscar has a better exit. It could be just how they took the corner differently, or it could be just a lack of battery for Lando Norris. The next thing I want to go over is Lewis Hamilton's pit stop on lap 11 and how he was able to essentially jump, I believe, 8 cars or something, or 7 cars from that pit stop. So if we look at lap 11, so this is the lap that he comes into the pit at the end. You'll notice here a lot. Just look at his trace. Hamilton's the blue line. You'll notice that he is slower than everyone else, which is Piastri, Norris, and Leclerc, the top 3, through every single corner, mid-corner essentially. And then even a little bit here on the exit through the power zone in sector 3. I think these points essentially where he is slower, and he's probably visually slower too in these corners, is what helps him make a decision to pit. It's probably how Ferrari were able to make that decision to pit. I mean, even look at through the exit of Leclerc here, he's just so much slower. He has to literally get off the throttle, or at least go slightly neutral with the throttle before he's able to go again. So that, as you can see by the speed trace. This brings us to lap 12, the end of his pit stop. So essentially here, Lewis in the blue line, he's coming out of the pits. You'll notice tire warm-up is a big thing. He's a little slow through Eau Rouge, but then you notice he gets the tires warmed up after that, and you'll notice that through Les Combes, through Rivage, that off-camber right-hander, through Pouin, through the corners leading up to sector 3, he's just able to get an earlier exit compared to everyone else. He's also able to take more speed through the corners. So you can see he's much faster through a lot of these corners than most of the other drivers. And so that's how he's able to gain a huge advantage on them. You can even see here in the bus stop chicane, just higher mid-corner speed, earlier exit compared to Lando Norris, who decided to pit the lap after because Piastri was in the box. This brings us to lap 12. So again, this time I'm going to look at Oliver Bearman compared to Lewis Hamilton. Bearman in the Haas was one of the drivers that was undercut by Lewis's strategy. We're going to look at lap 12, so Lewis out of the pits again. You'll notice it's the same theme as what I said earlier. Essentially, Lewis is able to get an earlier exit than Bearman. He's able to carry more speed through the corners. Look at Pouin. It's about a 10-15 kilometer per hour difference through the mid-corner of Pouin. And then Lewis here, just so much more speed than Bearman in the orange line through this entire complex, and then getting that earlier exit than Oliver Bearman through sector 3, as well as a higher top end speed, interestingly. And then this is essentially, Bearman probably loses, I think he lost at least 3-4 seconds just through this sector 2 And essentially that leads to him losing a position to Lewis Hamilton. We're going to look at Yuki Tsunoda, another driver who lost positions due to Lewis Hamilton's undercut. Same theme as Oliver Behrman's earlier exit for Lewis Hamilton, higher mid-corner speed than Yuki Tsunoda for Lewis Hamilton earlier exits. Just really nothing going. And then the worst thing is because Max Verstappen pits on lap 12, Yuki Tsunoda, in an attempt to not double stack, decides to stay out again. Lewis gets an earlier exit than Tsunoda through the bus stop chicane, and it just compounds Tsunoda's race even more because now he has to go another lap. Here, lap 13, another lap where Tsunoda's just slower. He's essentially 50 kilometers per hour slower here. 60 kilometers per hour through Eau Rouge is probably at least a second or two lost there. He's slower through the entire sector 2. Lewis just higher mid-corner speed, earlier exit every single time, higher top-end speed. Yuki probably loses another couple seconds at least through sector 2, and then sector 3 Lewis has a higher top-end speed, probably loses another couple of tenths at least through sector 3, maybe even another second, and then Yuki comes into box, but it's too late. He's already lost multiple positions. I think Tsunoda ends up coming out behind a couple other drivers who ended up who boxed on lap 12 as well. So Yuki really got screwed over by the Red Bull strategy. We look at another Haas, the other Haas of Esteban Ocon in the orange line. Once again, same theme. Earlier exit for Lewis, higher top end speed. Look at through Pouan, nearly 50 kilometers per hour difference between Ocon and Hamilton through Pouan. It's just crazy. Probably Ocon lost a second just through there, and probably another couple seconds through these corners leading up to sector 3. So Ocon, another driver who was undercut by Lewis. In the end, Lewis's strategy paid off for him, and he was very smart about being able to essentially go on to the dry tires early and take advantage of it. Albon versus Hamilton was a race-long thing that essentially happened in this race. Unfortunately, Lewis was not able to overtake Alex, but it was a good battle nonetheless. As you can see here, it looks like Lewis is DRS here. Lewis is the orange line here. Lewis looks like he has more speed through the Kemmel Straight. I believe he had DRS here. But if you notice, interestingly, Albon through Sector 2 is able to attain a higher top end speed before each braking phase. He's essentially able to just hold off Lewis just long enough to where he actually gains on him through sector 2, which is something you don't expect to hear when Lewis is the higher downforce setup, but just being able to reach those top end speeds, and then importantly through Pouan maintaining a similar speed to Lewis, being able to at least keep the gap similar. And then through sector 3, Alex being able to have that lower downforce setup, Alex is able to take actually gain on Lewis Hamilton. It's pretty funny. I saw some of this the timing data live during the race, and I thought it was pretty funny to see Alex actually gap Lewis through sector 3 when it was clear the Ferrari was the faster car through most of the track, except for that part with no DRS and just a straight power zone. Of course, Lewis with a higher downforce setup, so that doesn't really help his drag. Same thing in lap 17, it's the same theme, so I'm not going to go over it too much, but higher top end speed through sector 2 just before the braking phases, and then once again a higher top end speed in sector 3 to keep the gap and then stretch it by about a tenth. And essentially Albon was able to negate the gain that Lewis got through DRS or a slipstream through the Kemmel Straight, and able to essentially just keep that gap even while giving Lewis a slipstream through sector 3. We skip to lap 35 because there's actually a big point in the race from lap 17 to around lap 34, 35 where Lewis is actually not really close to Alex at all for DRS at least. It was like 1.2 to 2.2 second gap. It just really wasn't there for Lewis. I think Lewis was trying to manage his tires a little bit and maybe get some battery going, because starting around lap 35, he makes a push for Alex. With DRS here, as you can see by the speed trace data, has a much higher top end speed at the Kemmel Straight. But same theme again for Alex, able to get higher speed just before each braking phase in Sector 2, and then able to maintain essentially the same level speed as Lewis while still giving him a slipstream. That's very important because a slipstream in theory should help you gain time on the driver ahead. Instead, Lewis is maintaining and even losing some time through Sector 3 to Alex in essentially what is a long straight. We skip ahead to lap 38. No DRS this time for Lewis. So importantly, as you can see, the speed trace data, Alex is actually slightly faster at some parts, given the fact that he has that lower downforce setup. And once again, Lewis unable to keep up with Alex through the Sector 2. Alex able to hit that top end speed, higher top end speed than Lewis before each braking zone. Interestingly, though, this time in lap 38, Alex does lose some speed to Hamilton through Pouan, but once again gains that time back a little bit through the end of Sector 2, and then essentially maintaining the same speed in Sector 3 so that Lewis can't really overtake. Last lap, lap 44, same theme again, even though with the DRS, look at that huge difference for Lewis. Once you can see as soon as he gets DRS, you can see that speed trace just gap compared to Albon, that huge, probably 20-25 kilometer per hour gap. But once again, Lewis just can't gain any time, and especially if you look through Lake Home here, Alex is able to actually take more speed through Lake Home, which is kind of strange since Lake Home is essentially a chicane and then another right-handed corner. You would think that Alex would at least be able to take Lewis would be able to take more speed than Alex through the first half of that corner, but instead it's Alex who's able to take more speed. I think this helps Alex through as well because he's able to gain some more time through Rivage here, and then he's able to or heading into Rivage, sorry, and then he's able to gain more time into the entry of Pouan. On the exit of Pouan, though, it looks like Lewis gained some time back, but then once again, when you can't really gain any time through Sector 3, it's like you can't really gain any time, like I said, with that Lewis can't gain any time on Alex, and so as a result, the gap stays around 0.8 of a second. In the end, Lewis kind of drops off just before the finish line. He concedes to Alex Albon in this race. Fourth point is Hulkenberg's lap 32 pit stop. This is actually something I think a lot of people didn't really talk about, but I just wanted to show the difference between a fresh set of tires and a very used set of tires, essentially, in the midfield. So Hulkenberg and Behrman. Hulkenberg was ahead of Oliver Behrman before the pit stop, and this is the lap where Hulkenberg comes out of the pits. Behrman is on very, very old tires. I think it was 20 or 30 lap old mediums. Hulkenberg's onto a new set of mediums, and you can see immediately through Sector 2, Hulkenberg's just able to get on the power earlier. He's able to maintain similar or slightly higher speeds mid-corner. Earlier exit, very important here. Earlier exit through at the start of Sector 3. He's able to essentially, Nico's essentially able to gap or eat into Behrman's time throughout most of the corner. And then here in the bus stop chicane, once again, getting on the power earlier and having a higher top end speed through the exit of the bus stop chicane. Same thing for lap 34, the very next lap afterwards. Hulkenberg in the blue line, you can see in Pouan, he's just able to carry more speed through it, gain some more time. It's the same theme here. Lap 34, Hulkenberg's also able to get some DRS from the car ahead. I believe it was Esteban Ocon at the time. Behrman here is not in a DRS train kind of, but he's not right in front of Hulkenberg. So this telemetry is just really to show you the difference between a old set of mediums and a new set of mediums. Ocon and Hulkenberg is much more important. So you'll see on lap 34. On lap 33, Hulkenberg actually, interestingly, gets overtaken by Ocon at the end of the Kemmel Straight. So Hulkenberg comes out of the pits just in front of Ocon, and then Ocon overtakes him again at the end of the Kemmel Straight. So this is now Hulkenberg DRS on Ocon. He eventually overtakes Esteban Ocon into Leclerc. And then Sector 2, look at the difference between a new set of mediums and an old set of mediums. I think Ocon's tires were even older than Behrman's at this time of the race, or at this point of the race. And you can see just higher mid-corner speeds, higher top-end speeds for Nico Hulkenberg through every single corner, through every single braking phase, just higher top-end speeds. Ocon, interestingly, has higher top-end speed in Sector 3. I think Hulkenberg was running a slightly higher downforce setup, as you can see, especially in P1. Look at the difference, probably around the 35 kilometer per hour difference between Hulkenberg and Ocon mid-corner through P1. That probably saves Hulkenberg, or helps Hulkenberg gain at least a second on Ocon there. And then lap 37 later on, Behrman, I just wanted to kind of note this was pretty funny to see. Behrman actually here on lap 37, he has DRS and double slipstream off of both Tsunoda and I believe was Gasly in front of Tsunoda at this point of the race. It was just super funny to see Behrman essentially getting that double DRS effect. DRS plus double slipstream, so it's a double DRS effect essentially through the Kemmel Straight. And then Hulkenberg, he was 2 seconds behind the driver in front of him at the time, so he was not able to get any DRS. Fifth point I want to talk about is Leclerc and Verstappen on lap 36. So if you notice here in the bus stop chicane, you'll notice that Verstappen in the orange line is able to be much faster than Leclerc through the bus stop chicane. In fact, Leclerc slows down significantly through the bus stop chicane. We're talking about almost 50 kilometers per hour, which is something you don't want to do. The bus stop chicane is not that slow. It's not Monaco levels of slow. And that right there essentially is what helps Max Verstappen gain 0.7 of a second on Leclerc in that one corner alone. And then in lap 37, the next lap, the gap is now less than 2 seconds. It was about 2.3, I think, at the time. Now it's about 2 seconds at the time. Now it's like 1.2 seconds. The gap between Leclerc and Verstappen, Leclerc in third, Verstappen in fourth. So you can see no strong slipstream effect for Verstappen, even though he's only 1.2 seconds behind Leclerc at the time of this race. Verstappen, like Hamilton, running that high downforce setup, just not able to really gain on Leclerc running the skinnier rear wing, skinnier front wing, less draggy car. As you can see, Verstappen's able to make some inroads in Sector 2, but not as much as you would expect with the higher downforce setup. And then once again through here, Leclerc in the blue line just able to gain some time on Verstappen, and so the gap is not able to decrease any further. No strong slipstream effect for Verstappen, even though he's only 1.2 seconds behind. And yeah, just nothing really working for Max. We look at the next lap, lap 38, is the same idea. No strong slipstream effect for Verstappen anywhere, even though he has the essentially he has that gap at less than 2 seconds. He probably should have a slight slipstream at least. And then Leclerc, interesting, able to get better exits, it looks like, out of Lecombe into Rivage, and then heading to Pouan, a slightly better exit. Max gets some time back in the mid-corner, but nothing really working for Max here. He could have been saving some battery, but I also think he's just too draggy of a car, essentially, on the wet setup. And then finally, we're going to look at point 6, which is Norris catching Piastri at the end of the race. For those McLaren fans, or for any F1 fan, you would have noticed that Lando essentially caught up to Oscar in the last 6-7 laps of the race. The gap went from like 8 seconds to 3 seconds. And so I just wanted to show you what it looks like on the telemetry. Piastri in blue, Lando Norris in orange. Oscar Piastri, as you can see, he meets Isaac Hadjar, who is a back marker in this race. Piastri ends up lapping Hadjar later in the race. I believe on the next lap, actually. But interestingly, Piastri meets Hadjar in sector 2 and then is unable to really overtake him. So he slows down greatly. You can see compared to Norris able to take more speed. Norris also, interestingly, on the hard tire that's younger than Piastri's tire. And so you got to remember Norris is essentially running the much better tire at this point in the race. Sure, it's the harder tire, but it's degraded much less, and it's 2 laps younger than his teammates. So you can see Oscar unable to overtake Hadjar, loses a ton of time through Rivage, and on the exit of Lecombe, once again loses more time through the corners leading up to sector 3, and the effect is that Lando is able to gain 0.6 of a second. So you can see here these small gaps, 0.6 of a second gain for Lando Norris. Once again, lap 42 is a couple laps later. Piastri is unable to go quite as fast through here compared to Lando, so Lando gains some time there. Piastri able to gain some time back through Pouan, interestingly. Probably setup related between the two, and also let Lando on the harder tire. Maybe slightly less grip just for Pouan in itself, but once again through the corners leading up to sector 3, Stavilo, etc. Piastri is just slower than Lando is just really about it. It gains another 0.6, 0.7 of a second through there. And then finally, Lando, Norris, Oscar, Piastri, final lap of the race. Once again, Lando faster than Oscar through the exit of Lecombe, or through the mid corner of Lecombe, and then the exit slightly faster. And then once again through Stavilo and through the corners leading up to sector 3, much faster for Lando, probably another couple tenths, 3-4 tenths of a second compared to Piastri. And then finally, interestingly, Oscar decides to do some very big lift and coasting into the bus stop chicane. Lando doesn't. Probably helps Lando gain probably a second there, which makes the gap seem a little smaller than it actually was. And then once again, Piastri slows down just before the line. Lando goes straight through it at full speed. So Lando gains 1.7 seconds here, but in reality, with the lift and coast by Oscar, it's probably only about 0.8 gained, 0.7 gained, such as the previous laps that we looked at for Lando. So in the end, Lando probably needed another 6-7 laps to really catch and then overtake his teammate Oscar. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys thought this was educational and enlightening, and I hope you guys have a good day.